Health Minister Zweli Mkhize has been dominating headlines recently as allegations of corruption surface involving the awarding of a communications tender to the company Digital Vibes. It's yet another government corruption scandal to rock the country, and the public is growing increasingly impatient with government's lack of accountability. Mkhize's recent press conference to attempt to address the scandal did not satisfy the public's need for answers. However, the Special Investigating Unit is investigating the matter, and Mkhize has called for patience to allow the investigations to run their course.
This was not intended to avoid ventilating the issues in the public space, but we were advised to exercise prudence to protect the integrity of these investigations as documents and individuals were being interrogated through a formal and official process by the investigators.
I'm Catherine Rice, a journalist for News 24's Multimedia Department, and this is The Story. This week we'll look at the various allegations that are unfolding and how this is likely to impact on the credibility of President Cyril Ramaphosa. His response will be crucial to regaining the trust of a citizenry that has become jaded and wary of promises from the president to root out corruption.
You're listening to The Story. It's a podcast by News 24. We'll speak to journalists and experts about the week's biggest story. This is what we saw, heard, and uncovered this week.
This week we're talking to News 24 investigative journalist Carl Cohen. Carl, there have been some explosive allegations involving Mkhize, including yet another this week, the revelation that Digital Vibes bought a second-hand bakkie for Mkhize's son Dadani. The allegations have been unfolding since early this year when the Daily Maverick Scorpio first broke the story, and each week it seems to get worse as more is uncovered. Carl, tell us about the company and what services they claim to deliver, and what exactly are they being accused of?
So this is where it gets very interesting. Digital Vibes is a communications company that was hired essentially to help the Department of Health communicate and, run sort of information campaigns on the national health insurance and on Covid-19 from January 2020. So they were effectively helping the department get, public messaging out there about public health and, especially around Covid-19. So now there are allegations that the Minister Zweli Mkhize interfered in the appointing of this company, who was ultimately paid 150 million rand between January 2020 and early 2021.
I mean, it's quite astounding, and one has to think, what exactly was their relationship? I mean, did Mkhize know these people before? How did they know each other, and for how long, and in what context, Kyle?
A key figure in the Digital Vibes sort of side of things is Tahira Mater, and she has been a very close associate of Zweli Mkhize's for a very, very long time while he was in politics in KZN and moving up into the national space. Another lady involved in Digital Vibes is also Nadira Mita. Her and Tahira are obviously very close, and social media sort of shows this very close relationship. There's a third woman here. Her name is Radha Hariram. And she is on paper the only director of Digital Vibes. But now it sounds like, according to reporting by the Sunday Times this weekend, that Radha, Tahira, and Nadira have had a big falling out. And Radha has now actually opened charges of fraud against Tahira and Nadira. So these are people who've known the minister for a very long time. And most importantly, they worked on his ANC presidential campaign back in 2017. And when he became Minister for Health, they were also sort of brought into his sphere. They were communication specialists that sort of worked in and around and close to him and fielded some of the more difficult interactions with the media.
I mean, Mkhize himself has denied benefiting personally, but, he's kind of said he simply signs off on these contracts, but isn't actually involved in the tender process itself. But I mean, ultimately, Kyle, the buck does stop with him. So how do you think this is going to impact on his reputation and his political future?
Well, over and above, just simply, there are so many questions over how he has handled COVID-19. And, depending on who you speak to, people will say, oh, but he's done such a good job. But there are many out there who say he's done a very bad job. And this is just another example of that. I think that it's just too convenient that such a close friend of the minister's gets this seemingly sweetheart deal being paid millions of rands just to organize, for the minister to speak on the SABC, which is a state-owned broadcaster. Any one of us could pick up the telephone and organize that. So it's something that I think is a little bit too close to home for Zweli. I don't think that the minister will survive this. I don't think he can, because there is no logical explanation. Even if you do say, oh, I didn't have a hand in the tender process or anything like that, you knew that this company was there. You knew that your close friend Tahira was working there. And if you didn't, you were negligent in, managing your department. So one way or the other, it's very bad for him. And I don't think he's going to be able to explain this one away very easily.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I think just South Africans just really have so much to deal with at the moment. It's, load shedding is back, there's corruption, we've got an economy that's battling to survive, and now, of course, we're faced with the third wave of COVID. I mean, on Sunday last week, Carl, when Ramaphosa announced the imposition of a level 2 lockdown, he made absolutely no mention of the allegations about Mkhize. And I mean, these so-called family meetings are not allowing journalists the freedom to ask questions, which I think is just adding to the frustrations that are really just being felt by South Africans at the moment. So, I mean, this ongoing avoidance of journalists is really, what do you think it's actually doing to the public's trust in the president?
I think the president's getting extremely bad advice, but also our president has a track record of when he's put on the spot. If you'll remember the Bosasa saga and money that was paid to his son, when he was put on the spot in parliament by the former DA leader Mmusi Maimane, he said the wrong thing. He didn't say, he didn't answer the question very well, and it landed him in a whole lot of trouble with the public protector. And, so I think that the president has been advised to stick to the script. And I think that it's wrong, because this is a president who can speak off script and who can sort of wing it. But I think he's worried that he might say the wrong thing, that he might not intimate the correct details. And I don't think it's from him personally. I think there are people in and around the president who are giving him really, really bad advice. But also, Catherine, the president is under siege. If you think about what he has gone through in the past 2 years, just from his perspective and what we have gone through as a country, there are so many uncomfortable questions that could be posed to him that at this stage, I think there's a feeling that if the floor is opened too much, the president will be put in a position where he is severely embarrassed. And that sort of plays into their thinking. On our side, we want answers. And I've stopped looking to the president a long time ago for those answers.
And I think a lot of South Africans have. I think it's just, people are tired of it all. It's just every day there's just another story, another headline. And I think the public perception seemed to be that Mkhize was one of the good guys, or am I being a bit too generous?
Are there good guys in politics? I don't think so. And Zweli definitely comes from a place in South African politics that is well known for being quite contentious and quite competitive, which is, KwaZulu-Natal. And I do not think that anyone that gets to a position where he is in the ANC now can be perceived as good or clean. What we have to understand is that perhaps maybe the scandals aren't as big, and maybe the scandals were slightly better hidden, but they are there if you go looking long and hard enough.
I mean, just lastly, Carl, is there anyone who would be able to replace Mkhize at this point? I mean, he's got the experience. It will be a very difficult task, I think, for the president to actually find the right person to fill his shoes.
Well, yes and no. I mean, we've got a couple of excellent, provincial representatives for health, and I'm thinking particularly of people down, in Gauteng and so on. The problem really is that I think we've seen this with the ANC. It's not a matter of having someone as the health minister who is experienced in the health field. It's more about what's politically available and optionable and actionable. And I do think that if Zweli cannot survive, that there are younger people within the ANC who could step up into that position. The Deputy Minister, Joe Pathla, he's not given much credit, but from my understanding he's extremely involved and extremely hands-on. We just haven't seen him much because, of course, the limelight all fell on the minister. And then, of course, we also have Dr. Sandile Buthelezi, who is the Director General. And I think that no matter who the minister is, Dr. Buthelezi will do a pretty good job of steering the ship in the meantime through, hobbling from crisis to crisis. But from what I hear from within the department, there's a great amount of respect for Dr. Buthelezi, even if there are disagreements between myself and Dr. Buthelezi over how certain COVID things have been handled and communicated.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Carl. That was Carl Cowan, News 24's investigative journalist. News 24 political journalist Karine du Plessis joins us now. Karine, this scandal, it's just another example of politicians and companies taking advantage of COVID. Do you think they've capitalized on COVID-related corruption like so many others?
Well, yes, I think it's very disappointing. I mean, I think this is the most disappointing one of them all. But in Gauteng, for instance, we've already seen the MEC Bandile Masuku. He fell because of a scandal that was in his department. I mean, he sort of technically didn't provide enough oversight, so there's no direct link. But the personal links to the companies are too bad. And in the Eastern Cape, we've seen the MEC of Health there falling because of some corruption allegations. So, but I think Zweli Mkhize, I don't think anybody expected this of him. It was really disappointing when the story first broke, and it was hard to believe. So it seems like just another company capitalizing on COVID. But yeah, I mean, it's the problem is vast. The SIU the other day said they are investigating 5 billion rands worth of COVID-related corruption,
Sure.
and I think they found wrongdoing in about half of those cases in terms of the amount. So I hope somehow that this isn't true, but it's not looking good.
It's not looking good at all. And I mean, it's bound to have some pretty serious political fallout for both Mkhize and the president. I mean, Ramaphosa is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place right now. I mean, what are your predictions?
Yes, I've never been so happy not to have been him, because he has to act. I mean, in a way, he has to act because he's been pushing this line of corruption must go. He was very, I think in February especially, he came out very hard about COVID-related corruption. He said action must be taken against it. So so I mean, it depends on the SIU report, but I think even in terms of just the moral and ethics, the morality and ethics around it, we've seen. I mean, Zweli Mkhize's son already saying, he's sort of close to those involved in digital vibes. So I think the president will have to act, and I think the best way for him would be to quietly persuade the minister to step down by himself, because the president wouldn't want Mkhize to look like a victim and give the RET faction an axis of woundedness to revolve around, and it would strengthen them. But if he doesn't act, it would make the president look really bad. Zweli Mkhize himself he's never been that close to the president. When he ran in 2017 in Nasrec, he first made a bid to be president, and then he ran for deputy president, and then he withdrew. But he was much closer to the camp of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. So, and then, and later he sort of fell in behind David Mabuza, who became deputy president. Mm-hmm. So there's also the political dynamic is very interesting, and it's hard to tell which way Minister Mkhize will go.
I mean, I think people are champing at the bit to see action happening. When do you think the public will actually get some answers about what the ANC plans to actually do about this in terms of sanctioning those involved?
Yeah, the ANC's processes are a bit different to the processes that might be followed in government. I mean, in terms of government, I think the SIU investigation will come out, and then the president might have to do something in the same way that the Gauteng premier did something about Bandile Masuku. But the ANC processes, I spoke to George Mashamba, who's heading the ANC's disciplinary committee, the Integrity Commission. And he said he was kind of expecting that the minister would come and explain himself before the commission, because that's the reason why the commission is there. If there's some allegation of wrongdoing, something swirling over your head, you go to the Integrity Commission and you explain and you say, well, this is what happened. I need space, or this, the reports are completely wrong. So it looks like the Integrity Commission will invite the minister to come and explain himself there. And George Mashamba said to me, it's not, for us, it's not about the legalistic processes, because sometimes people can kind of commit corruption and it's not legally, it can't legally be proven because they've done it in a clever way. So this is about the moral and ethics of it. This is about, it's looking bad. What happened there? Do you think you should step aside for this to clear? Morally, do we want these allegations to be around a minister or around a leader of the ANC? Do we want this to be swirling around somebody's head? But yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. Zweli Mkhize, I mean, he's one of his old-time comrades said to me, but he's done really well in terms of the COVID pandemic. He's really been, shown leadership. He's really been steady. He's been fairly clear and level-headed, and I can't quite imagine who they will replace him with. So I think that's also a difficulty.
People are going to be watching this story very closely. Thank you so much for your time, Karine. That was News 24 journalist Karine du Plessis. And that's it from us this week. I'm Catherine Rice, and this week's episode was produced with the help of Amy Gibbings.